Some of these clowns talk about it, but see, I lived it. When that cell door opens, the talking's over. Ain't no guns, ain't no drive-bys. Get your knife. Straight hand-to-hand combat. Peace, blessings, and salutations. My name is Yarima Karama here with another segment of Voices from Behind the Wall. This segment, I've been kind of going through some segments dealing with individuals and and that sort of thing, in their individual stories. But this segment I'm doing now, it kind of came to me because I look out at the landscape, and I've said before on a few different occasions that we're in a prison out here in society. This is just a larger conglomerate of the smaller prisons that we see around the nation that have the barbed wire fences around them, the big walls around them that lock them in. So in those prisons, you got 1,000, 2,000, sometimes 2,500 individuals living in a small confined space. Whereas out here, you have over 300 million people living, but there's still, if you look at the real science and the metrics behind it, they're still being regulated and controlled and segregated. And the police, they segregate certain areas and patrol them more than others and that sort of thing. So I clearly see the comparison between out here and that and the prison of confinement that we think is the only prison that exists, when in actuality it isn't. So as I'm looking out at the landscape, you see these different groups, and whenever there's an issue or an infraction, the groups, they, especially, and I'm talking about African American, Hispanic groups, they tend to want to march. And especially in the African American community, we tend to want to sit down and dialogue and talk. And, we want to, there's always a call for calm, and there's always a call for, let's sit down and try to talk this out, let's dialogue. And, that has become a common theme. Behind the wall, it's a little different. And if you look at some of the brothers from the 50s and 60s that had the movements like the Black Panthers, the Black Liberation Army, the Weathermen, these different what the government considers radical organizations, but what I consider to be love units. When you look at them, they had their what our government has, they had. What our government has and what they had is what is considered a covert group and an overt group. Covert meaning they're out there, the people that give the speeches and that sort of thing. And the overt group meaning like your, let's say, Navy SEALs, those kind of groups. And so in prison, the dynamics are like this. I was incarcerated with some of those revolutionary members. And here was their philosophy, and I loved it, quite frankly. Whenever there would be something that would happen or an infraction that would go down, brothers, your covert group would want to get together and talk and dialogue. And here's the scenario that would always happen. We would get in a room or a group or get a section of the prison yard, and you would see these groups just kind of combusted together, ready to talk, dialogue. And once that talk and dialogue would start, I would give it about 5 or 10 minutes, and you would always, in every scenario I've ever seen, the revolutionaries, those ones that were considered revolutionaries, those ones that had revolutionary cases, many times they were called political prisoners, they would get up and leave. They would bounce. And they would go put in work. And so, and as I talked to these brothers, the consensus was, there's too much talking. There's too much talking. And so and they would agree that, yeah, there is
people need to dialogue, people need to talk, but at the end of the day, we're about that work. We're about putting in that work, and we don't really have time to talk. You guys talk. You guys do all the talking, and then when you're done talking, you'll see that the work is done. And this would go both ways. I remember there was a specific scenario where this dude and this is just how prison works. So I keep it real. I don't cut. Now I'm not going to expose certain people or even certain groups. I wouldn't do that, but I will expose certain scenarios and situations. So you got a guy who's very popular, and we'll call this guy Tony. Tony's very popular. He's very popular in the system. He's widely known, very respected in the system. And because of this respect, when I say very respected, meaning that he doesn't have any debts. People aren't chasing him down because he owes gambling debts. He's not on boys. He don't mess with homosexuals and that sort of thing. But most importantly, what makes him very respected is that, one, he's considered a leader, and he's not a rat. He's not a snitch. So what we came to find out is that Tony had been an undercover snitch in the closet for years and nobody knew it. And what took place was that Tony had snitched on a guy, and there were a few people that knew, but nobody ever really exposed it. And when it was finally exposed, it was like, wow. But because when you're respected, to that level and extent, people trust you. They entrust you. They have a trust for you, even a certain amount of faith that you're going to keep certain things concealed. It's just the way it is, So in prison, that's a big thing. If you're a snitch, I mean, now it's probably a little bit more lenient because of the demographics and the way things are now, but. Back years ago, that was unacceptable behavior. So when it's exposed that Tony's a snitch, here comes the dialogue. Like, what are we going to do? Because here's the thing. A person might be a snitch, but they might not be a punk. See, everybody who tells on somebody don't mean that they not nice with these, don't mean that they won't push a knife too. So, and Tony was all that. He was going to push that knife. And he was nice with his hands, and people knew it because he had been in the system putting in work, which is another reason why people didn't suspect that Tony was a snitch. But in any case, it came down to the dialogue because now everybody knows. And so you can't be a strong group if other groups know that you got a snitch amongst you, man. And you're letting him live, you're letting him stay out here in general population, that's unacceptable. And so here came the dialogue. And the dialogue went on for a couple days. At the end of the day, people were a little frightened of Tony. Bottom line, they were afraid to step to Tony. Now, it had been insinuated that Tony needed to check in, that he needed to come off the compound, that sort of thing. But that insinuation wasn't taken serious by Tony because he didn't go anywhere. The revolutionaries, they didn't dialogue. They waited to see what was going to happen. And when they saw that it was just going to continue to be dialogue, they were no longer part of the negotiating process. They went and put in that work. And you know what? The same, and I mean, some of you probably are thinking, well, and I'm not going to go into the details of what I mean about putting in that work. You should know. But the same holds true out here. And so, we got a president, we got members of Congress, we have our the political figures out here who they sit down and dialogue. But guess what? That overt group who's off the radar, that covert group, and I think I had them backed up. Actually, the overt is the politicians, and that the covert, because when you talk about covert, you're talking about cover. So that covert group, such as the SEALs and those groups like that, they're not talking. They're putting in work, and you know, and so it's the same things apply. And so, needless to say, we didn't see Tony again after that. And, you know, it was a learning lesson for me as to, okay, you know, this is the things that you need, not only in prison, but this applies to community. This applies to our armed forces. This applies to our politicians. This applies to life, man. It applies to life. And that's why I love those brothers, man. So I give them a shout out because those brothers are needed. And, you know, at the end of the day, man, you know, call it what you want. But, you know, if we lived in the perfect world, we wouldn't need armies. If we lived in the perfect world, people wouldn't have to hold armies and regimes in place to protect food and protect their resources from being stolen. We're far from the perfect world. So that covert team, they're always needed. Yurima Karama here with another segment of Voices from Behind the Wall. Hey, like I said, connect with me on FB, IG, Twitter. Go to my webpage. You can inbox me. I love the inboxes. I appreciate the feedback. And most of all, I appreciate the love and support that you are extending to me. It's a blessing. I'm tapped into universal law. And you all are a blessing to me. I appreciate that. You can go to my webpage, www.yurimakarama.com. Again, to the young people that are listening, never let nobody tell you what you can't do. To the haters out there that, you know, give the negative feedback, hey, man, I love you too. You know why? Because a warrior never knows his strength without a foe. I'm out one.
Testament, I'm on one, give you the treatment, represent to a further extent. It's the first volume of my testament. My testament.